Welcome to Big Little Stories. I'm Ivy Sharmetz. If you are like me and you feel especially inspired by stories of people who turn their pain into purpose, this conversation is for you. I recently learned about an organization called MEND, which stands for Meeting Essential Needs with Dignity. It's a hunger relief network in Essex County. They're doing some really incredible work, and Robin Peacock is the executive director. I'm so happy to welcome you here today. Thank you so much for being here, Robin.
Thanks for having me, Ivy.
Of course, we're going to talk about the work that MEND does in detail in just a little bit. But in a nutshell, how would you describe what MEND does?
We are a connector of resources, and we're focused on really bringing lots of fresh and healthy food into the hunger relief system. So, through food pantries, through mobile programming, connecting people with resources, especially fresh and healthy food.
Yeah, which I know is so important, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about that. This work is very personal for you. Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up?
Sure. I grew up in Central Florida, and I was raised by a single mom, and she had a high school education. So she, struggled like many parents to make ends meet. I grew up on food stamps. It was something I was extremely embarrassed about. Um, People in my circle, I didn't even know until probably 3 or 4 years ago. It was one of these things, like the shame, even as an adult, kind of stays with you. But my mom worked hard and, basically did all the things that she could do to provide for me. And one of the things she instilled in me was go get your education and, give yourself a path that's going to give you more options than I had.
I,
So,
I've heard you
yes.
say also that your mom, you said she did what she could to protect you from being hungry. What did that look
Yeah.
like?
Um, Looking back and now as a parent, I think I didn't realize like what our circumstances really were. So when I think about what she did, like I only realized we were on food stamps when she took out the food stamps. Back in those days, it was like funny money, like Monopoly
Mm-hmm.
money to pay at the grocery store. And she worked many jobs and those things, but I didn't realize, like how bad it was. So she was skipping meals, she was making sure that I had what I needed, but she was sacrificing, what she needed to do that. So as a parent now, you see it more clearly, but in the moment, as a young person and a teenager, I didn't really realize until I was further away from the situation.
Well, and I know you also you mentioned the food stamps, and you also, have stories about being in line and having to put food back,
Oh yeah.
and feeling that embarrassment. What does that feel like for a young girl to be standing there and have that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I still get chills when you just said it. I was like, oh yeah, it takes me right back to that moment of like at the cash register. P.S. It was a smallish town. Most of my friends worked, at the grocery store and other places, and to be standing there and like asking like, how much is this? Okay, let me put it back. It's mortifying. It feels terrible. I think there's just so much shame in that feeling of like needing something that you can't afford. And I think well, we'll get to men, but I think that's what really motivated me to kind of like, how can we flip the tables a little bit so this doesn't feel as bad as it can.
Were there resources available to you, or did you know that if there were resources available?
Um, I mean, I wasn't sure, at that age. My mom did go. I remember her taking me to the unemployment office.
Mm.
And I remember her having to take these tests, and it was really hard with a young child, I think, to kind of show up and jump through a lot of these hoops. So I know she tried to seek out the resources that were available. She was active in her church, and I do remember some Thanksgivings, people would show up and fill up our
Mm.
cupboards. And again, at the time, I was like, well, that's really nice. Who are these people just coming to bring us food? Well, now I know these are probably people that worked at the local food pantry at the church that knew that we needed it. So I would say like there were resources, but I think there wasn't. If people were talking about it, it was not very open, at least, and certainly not to me, like for sure.
All right, so Robin, you talked about how your mom emphasized education. How did you end up going to law school?
Um, I wish I, I wish it was like, oh, I had that planned my whole life. I kind of fell into it. I was wanted to be a journalism major actually, and I liked writing. I was encouraged in school, to do writing, and I took a class that was a legal studies class, and I loved it, and I decided to follow that path. So I ended up doing that for probably 15 years of my working life,
Wow.
and worked for the IRS and just really enjoyed being an advocate.
So I was going to say you became a tax attorney, but then how did you end up working with MEND?
Yeah, so I loved being a lawyer, but I also was having children at the time. So I took
Mm.
a little break and I wanted to still kind of do something else outside the house. So I began volunteering. And through my volunteer work, was starting to think about going back to work and was trying to decide if I wanted to go back to law or something else. And at the time, someone I volunteered with said, there's this organization named MEND. They don't have any staff really. They would like to hire someone as a grant writer uh, for like a 6 month consulting gig. And I thought, all right, writing for like the legal field and trying to convince a judge to decide in my favor is probably not so different from grant writing, to try and convince a foundation to give us some money. And so I dipped my toe in, and I basically fell in love with the organization from day one. I mean, out of the gate, I spent some time getting to know local food pantry leaders, and as soon as I had my first meetings with them, I realized like this was where I was meant to be spending my time and that I could do a lot in that space.
Given your background, was it an immediate, did you kind of feel this immediate connection to this work and what you could bring to it?
Yeah, except it's funny, like it yes, I felt very like I knew something about this world and I felt like I could bring a perspective to it. Um, but I didn't seek out like the hunger space, which is always interesting to me. I think if it had been any kind of nonprofit, I would have been pretty motivated by it. But the fact that this happened to be, a hunger relief focused nonprofit made it so much easier for me to kind of like get fully involved.
And so, what's it like when you see kids that are being helped by the programs that you are directing? Do you see yourself in them? Is it what is that feeling like for you?
Um, it's actually beautiful. I think that the thing about our programming is we've designed it to be as stigma free as possible. And so we will work, for example, with a Head Start preschool that we know is in a food desert community. So there's not this like come up and sign your name and like, fill out all this paperwork to receive this food that's been donated. It feels like a beautiful free farmers market that just happens to be at the school once a month. So in a way, it doesn't feel like someone is what I would say is needy or hungry. It's just an experience that they can have with their families right after school. And
Yeah.
so we're trying to make it. Um, I think because of the way I experienced it, we're trying to flip that around and say, like, what if we approach this from like just with dignity leading the way here? What should this experience feel like for a child? It should just feel like going to the grocery store or going to a farmer's market. It shouldn't feel like, oh, this feels bad and I'm embarrassed and like I'm lesser than because of my socioeconomic status or whatever other circumstances put me in this situation.
Yeah, and you had mentioned the stigma too, and I think um, during the pandemic, a lot of us became aware that many people are very close to hunger,
Yeah.
or to food uncertainty, and it's that stigma that prevents people from getting help. Would you say that that's often the case? And how do you tell people that it's okay?
Yeah, I mean, we try and normalize things as much as possible. I think a lot of our work is done very collaboratively. So well, first of all, we work to have a very consistent presence in the communities where we provide resources, but we also work very closely with community partners. So I think a lot of good things happen when people trust who they're speaking with. So if someone needs food, often they're going to turn to a close friend, a loved one, someone in their community, like at their school or a house of worship. And so if we're connected in that way to, those channels, I think it opens up a lot more opportunity to kind of share resources and information and to be like a trusted resource. So we really design it in a way that makes it accessible and available, and we try not to ask too many questions. It's the tension between, like, we want data to show that our programming is working, but we also don't want anyone to feel like bad about seeking out resources and food. So there's a balance there, and we try and strike that very carefully, and definitely lean toward the dignity side of things and not asking too many questions.
I love that. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, I want to talk about the programs that you have at MEND and why they are so unique in some ways and making such a big impact. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Robin, you mentioned that you do all of this work with dignity. Why is that so important? It's right in the name of the organization.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most important thing, like approaching this work from the perspective of the food recipient is a whole different way to look at this work. And in our view, like, it's the best way. I know we're biased, but the whole hunger relief system has traditionally been built on, you know, food, what I would call food donors or corporate, donated food. Like, here's food that's available that we're not going to use. The end user should take it and be happy and grateful for it. And ours is the opposite of that, because we're of the view that, like, the person receiving the food is the most important viewpoint to have in building this system, right? So if we approach it from, like, what would you actually like to eat, it brings a whole different quality to the work. And it actually allows people to choose food that's culturally relevant, that they would want to create, for meals they would want to make for their families. Um, and it actually leads to, I think, longer term health improvement, right? You're making food that people want more accessible by just asking them what they want. So to me, it's kind of a no brainer, but it is different than how historically hunger relief has been approached.
Well, and you're so right because I've been to various food banks and I've volunteered and you do sort of get a sense of exactly what you said, that some of the donations, it's almost like, should I throw it away or should I donate it? And it certainly is not the best of the best. But what you're doing with MEND is sort of reimagining that approach. Is it hard to get buy-in from people with this new method because it is unlike other systems?
It's really not hard to get buy-in. I think the reason why is because people get it.
Yeah.
Like, most people want to create healthy meals for themselves, for their families. So people understand the connection to, like, being able to have some choice in what you're eating and how important health is. I mean, how important food is to health. I think the tricky part about our model, but I will shout out our donors, is, like, it really depends on us being able to raise money to purchase the food that people want. So we do seek a lot of donated food, but we're very specific and we partner in certain ways. So we'll partner with farms, we'll partner with organizations that are doing food rescue, and we really focus in on making sure it's still high quality. And a lot of the fruits and vegetables, kind of fresh food, and then we raise money to purchase. So if what people want isn't coming through our donated channels, we're then rounding it out by purchasing. So that, I think, that was kind of like like the proof of concept. Like, if we talk about it in this way and if we approach it in this way, are people going to respond and help us raise the money to really be able to execute our programming the way we want? And knock on wood, so far that has been happening. So I think it just makes sense, honestly.
So I want to talk about some of the programs that you have at MEND. And I thought this was interesting. In 2023, the MEND network provided supplemental food to more than 490,000 people. And this is the part
Hmm.
that just blew me away. 90% of it was fresh food.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that statistic almost seems
It's crazy.
unheard of. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
I
you
know,
said it.
right?
You said it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was like, it's crazy. And I think we found our niche, right? Like the fresh food is the thing that people want the most, and it's the hardest thing to manage. And so if we can figure out how to get that right through just building really strong partnerships with food suppliers, trying to get our fundraising to like align with what we need to purchase, and then having community partners that are really bought in, and which we know they are because we're asking them like what type of food would they like, we can create a system that actually, we buy into the local food system, we pay farmers for their food, so it's a really beautiful thing. And so we really really strive for the fresh and healthy because we know that's what the community wants. Like there's this element of we've asked them and we know.
Yeah, yeah. And also, there's been studies that show, kids when they're in school, the healthier they eat, the easier it is for them to concentrate and then do well in school. So it has this, this
Hmm.
amazing domino effect. Talk to me about your pantry partnerships. I know you have partners with more than 20 food pantries that you work with. Talk to me about that.
Hmm. Yep, that is our longest standing program. That was the program I fell in love with when I first started. It's really a bringing together of these beautiful humans, like the best humans in the world, these food pantry leaders across Essex County. We bring them together once a month and we have an agenda, but it's really like to listen to them, talk about what trends they're seeing, what concerns they're having, share best practices. So we facilitate that for them. And then as there are trends that are coming up, we're obviously paying attention to that. Fresh and healthy food sourcing was the trend, still is, that I was hearing when I first started in 2015. And so that's why we've then built out a path toward how do we build a model that can be responsive to that. There are other trends we're starting to hear about now. So we're sort of keeping our ear to the ground, working with the pantry leaders to understand how we could be most helpful in working in partnership with them. Sometimes that just means as simple as bringing in a guest speaker on a particular
Mm.
topic. Sometimes it's building a whole system of programming to meet the needs that aren't being met otherwise. So it really ranges and it's driven solely by them.
And then I know you had mentioned these mobile markets, which make it easier for people to get healthy food. MEND on the Move. Talk to me about MEND on the Move.
Yeah, that is something that started during the pandemic because people weren't able to really get out. And if you're familiar with the food pantry model, it's wonderful, but it has some limitations in the sense of food pantries are often located, in small buildings. They don't have a lot of room to store things. They also are often open during the week, during the weekdays. So there was this energy around like, could we build something to serve people and meet them more where they are, as opposed to making them go one more place to get a resource. And so we started with 4 partners, and it was basically what we called mobile markets. It was we would commit for a year to show up once a month at a site where we knew the population needed food support, because we had a really close relationship with the community partner we were going to be working with. And we designed free farmers markets. And so we would, recruit volunteers to help us. We would purchase food, we would bring it. And it became a really lovely experience. And we could very much target, for example, the Head Start program I mentioned before. We could work with the teachers and find out like what lessons they were learning. We could build in, a nutrition piece of it. We had a little boy that ran out of a preschool to come to our market the other day, and he picked up an apple and he said, oh, and he started counting the apples, and he said A is for apple, and he was talking to his grandmother about how much he loves apples. And so it was really very hands-on, where people are already going to pick up their children, or in an affordable housing complex where people live, an older adult community. So we have a few different, now at this point now we have 14 different mobile market sites, and we commit for a whole year of programming with those partners.
So really bringing the
And
healthy
then,
food to the people that need it the most.
yeah, and where they are, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So it just reduces like one more barrier to accessing this food.
And then I know meant. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say we have home deliveries as like another aspect of the program, which is what it sounds like. Except the beautiful thing is, we purchase farm fresh, like a CSA farm share produce boxes from local farmers, and then Amazon in the community donates drivers for us. So it's a lovely matchmaking of farm fresh produce and some transportation resources, and we coordinate, where those deliveries go through, again, partners that have recommended. It's sort of the most extreme, like for people that really can't get to a pantry or a mobile market. Like it's usually people with disabilities, older adults, or families with very young children that have other issues that prevent them from being able to get out.
And then we just touched on this before, but the Food and Health Equity Coalition, which does recognize food insecurity as a social determinant of health. What does MEND do with that?
Yeah, so we're the anchor organization for that, and it really is a bringing together more of a cross-sector collaborative network. There's government, there's academia, there's philanthropy, there's, you know, hunger relief orgs, other nonprofits, social service orgs, bringing everyone together to do more collective advocacy work, resource sharing. It's basically like our Pantry Partners program, but a little bit bigger, broader, and getting to more of what I would call the root causes of the issue. So, how do we advocate for real change that's going to get us beyond just distributing the food, which is a great first step? How do we get people really like not needing that kind of resource longer term?
Robin, there is a thread of humanity and dignity through all of this work that you do. If you could go back to the little girl that was embarrassed when her mom had to put food back at the grocery store, what would you tell her?
Oh wow, get emotional. I would tell her it's gonna be okay. There's really good people in the world, and yeah,
You're one of those
yeah.
good people. You're
Yeah.
one of those good people now, Robin. I didn't mean to make you cry, but you are.
Sorry,
You're
was not expecting that.
well, you know what though, but it speaks to the amazing journey that you are on, and how you're impacting the lives of so many. And I said at the beginning, the people who turn pain into purpose are some of my favorite people, and you certainly are doing that, and changing the lives of so many people. Let's end on a happy note. Well, first, how do
Yes,
people how do people
thank
get
you.
how do people get in touch if they want to learn more about MEND or they want to help out?
Yep, that's great. The easiest is our website. It's www.mendnj for New Jersey.org. That has ways to volunteer, ways to give, information about our pantries if people need food, all kinds of things live on the website. And that's a great starting point.
Perfect. All right, now let's switch gears. We end each show with what we call three big little questions. We'll do a rapid fire. Are you ready for them?
Okay, I think so.
You are. You are. How do you,
Am I?
Robin? How do you get yourself out of a bad mood?
Oh, music. My son turned me on to Latin house music. It's my new favorite thing.
Okay, awesome. And so maybe this is the next question too. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh boy. Oh boy. Well, I sang What a Feeling from Flashdance
Oh,
many times in my life, so I might have to go with that one.
awesome. And what's one of your favorite spots in New Jersey?
Oh, so many, but I would say the South Mountain Reservation, which is near my home, and I like to hike a lot.
Awesome. Robin, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the work that you're doing, for sharing your story, for just making the world a better place. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Of course. Thank you. And that does it for today's Big Little Stories. Be sure to check us out on Instagram at Big Little Stories Show. I'm Ivy Sharmetz. I'll talk to you next time.